and we're sitting in there. That's good.
With my bung arm and everything.
I was about to say, injured wing, mate.
Yeah.
Found your bicep in your shoulder.
Yes, very much.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming on board.
Nah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've had a 1 month hiatus with moving, and so what better place than being in the Waikato, coming to one of the early guests, Thomas Nabs' awesome venture, the Water Boy, and tell us about your new gig, your new allegiance with the Water Boy, mate.
Yeah, so thanks very much for having me on. I'm a big fan of the podcast and listened to a few episodes. So I suppose for me, I'm the general manager of the Water Boy. So I saw firstly from afar what Thomas was doing with the Water Boy, then became a little bit more involved when I moved back from Japan and was captaining the Waikato side.
Mm-hmm.
And the Water Boy has a partnership with Waikato Rugby, as we do with the Chiefs and the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic also. So that through that relationship learned a little bit more, I suppose, in depth what the Water Boy is all about. And I kind of originally thought it was just about helping underprivileged Kiwis participate in sport, but there's so much more to it. And then Thomas approached me late last year, so towards the end of 2020, and said, I'm looking for a general manager and I think you're the right fit. So we went for coffee, and originally didn't think I was going to be in a position to be able to fulfill the role of general manager, but Nabsy being Nabsy is pretty good at getting what he wants, and he kind of saw the role and thought it was a perfect fit for a next professional athlete, someone that had strong ties into the Waikato community. I suppose being pretty proud and born and bred here in the Waikato, and then I suppose I got a bit more of an understanding of the depth of the Water Boy and what impact it really has in the community, and it really aligns to my personal values. And Thomas reassured me that I'd be able to transfer my skills and leadership skills that I gained through my professional career into a corporate world, for lack of a better word, which was something I was quite anxious about originally. I knew I had good leadership skills through, I suppose, the relationships and everything that had formed over time through my career, and I was lucky to be led by some amazing leaders and coaches and captains and fellow teammates. So a bit of that rubbed off along the way, and then Thomas reassured me that I'd be able to transfer that in, and what am I now? I suppose 4, 5, 6 months into the role, and it's actually been quite cool to see those skills transition over, and I'm still learning every day, but I love it.
So what sort of picture had you had in your mind about post-rugby? And when was that sort of starting? Like, you went to Japan a few years ago and you're still chucking the ball around it a bit there, mate.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, everyone, I remember having a conversation early on in my professional career, so in terms of once I became a chief with Byron Callagher, and it was in my first year. Myself and Brendan Leonard, we were at the bank having a few beers, and
the bank restaurant and bar, not the actual,
not BNZ. But so I was we're there having a few beers, and I remember he said to us, he's like, "Boys, enjoy this. Like, these are the days of your life, and before you know it, they'll be over." And as you do when you're a young fella, you're like, whatever, this is going to go on forever kind of thing. And for me, it nearly did. Like 20 years I was involved in professional rugby, both here in New Zealand and overseas, and but it went like that. And you kind of, I suppose it's the world you live in, and you're focusing constantly day to day, trying to improve and get better, and you're under a microscope at that professional level, so it's very intense kind of cycle that you throw yourself into. And it just, for anyone, I suppose, that's really knuckled down into anything in life, kind of know how quickly time can pass when you're really, really focused and driven into a task at hand. And I suppose when you're doing that for 12 months of the year effectively, it goes by pretty quick. So I wasn't, before I knew it, I was sitting here really, like I knew I had to do something in terms of sport, in terms of rugby, especially with rugby. That's where I was leaning towards, because I played professional rugby longer than I hadn't in terms of my time on earth. So when you put that into perspective, it was pretty daunting to go into the real world, but I can't say it's something that I was really anxious about, because in all honesty I never thought about it, because I feel that if you're in that professional realm and that's what you're trying to do, you've got to be all in. You can't be, what am I going to do next? Because if you're thinking that, you're already gone. And when you think about that, it does sound quite scary. And in all honesty, I didn't have much of a plan. Like I said, I knew I had some good skills that I developed through that, and I was very aware of that. I knew that once it was all said and done, I would have had to have found an avenue to apply those. And I'm pretty lucky that Thomas has given me an avenue to apply those into, let's say, a corporate world. But it's still very much, I can use a lot of the knowledge I have of the sport of rugby and sport in general to apply into my, I suppose, day-to-day life and role that I have here at the Waterboy. But I in all honesty, I thought coaching or something like that, I'd really love. I kind of had this idea for a while that I would almost become like a mentor for like a sports agency, and I would work with I suppose the younger players in terms of the new entry level of athletes, from all sports going into that professional realm originally, and just helping them be aware of, these are the things and the likely things that are going to come up that are going to be a big change for you, and these are the things that you need to pay attention to, and these are the things that you don't need to pay attention to. I wish, I was lucky that I had a few guys look out for me in that respect, and I had an amazing agent throughout my professional career.
Did you stick with them the whole time?
Yeah. Wow. So, Kevin Burgess.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So Kevin was my original agent, and then through a relationship he formed with Kent Hale and Mike Rogers, they formed Inside Running, and then so Kent basically took over what Kevin was doing for me, but I still stayed very connected to Kevin, to KB, and he's one of my trustees and my family trust, so that's how much respect and how much of a relationship I built with him throughout my career. But then also Kent, he was amazing, but one thing I would say is that he never played at that level, so he was very good at being there and being an ear, but there was certain things that he couldn't answer, where those older players in the changing room, when you got them, and that's why in team sport especially leadership and experience is so important. And I think all of us at certain points of our career, or as fans, we kind of like, that guy's past it, and you think like, why is he still there? It's because of what he does off the field, or he or she, depending, like those senior players that have been there and done that, they know, and they can say the right things at the right time, and their influence goes far beyond their personal performance on the field, and that's why leaders and experience is so important in sport.
Yeah, that was something that was pretty fascinating. As I was saying to you before we hit record, listening to Brad Weber speak about his time up here in the Waikato, missing out on an Otago contract, comes up here, and then the following year's made captain, and sort of speaking to the fact that there was a bit of a leadership or experience vacuum, and I think he termed the team as a bunch of school kids, obviously not in school, but fresh out of school, and like, what is it? Was there anyone that had come from an amateur realm when you started with Waikato yet, or or they were pretty come through professionalism?
Like in terms of when I started
What
playing.
year was that? With Waikato, what year was that?
2002.
Yeah.
So I was,
6 years, isn't it?
Yeah. So, 2002 was when I debuted for Waikato. So what's that, 19 years ago now. And I was in my last year of high school. So I played on the Friday for Waikato. Got pulled out of school early on in that week. I think it was a Monday. I got a message in mass to go to the principal's office, and then ended up being it's Susan Hassel, who's still a principal there now, or headmaster she calls herself, even though she's a female. She's the first ever headmaster or female headmaster of an all boys school in New Zealand. And she gave me a piece of paper with a number on it, and I rang it, and it was Ian Foster, who was the Waikato coach at the time. And he asked if I could get the day off school, proceeded to ask if I get the week off school. So I'm there going back and forth with Mrs. Hassel, and then she was like, yep. Like, I didn't know that they had already jacked us up and been talking to each other, but and then he said, because you're going to debut for Waikato on Friday. And then I had tears, and I'm crying, Mrs. Hassel's crying, we're hugging. And so going from that, training twice a week, school rugby was very different then to what it is now. In terms of that professionalism at first 15 level now, those kids will be in a lot better position to step into what I stepped into. In terms of mentally, I don't know if it's... I personally don't agree. I think they do too much, but I think we ask a lot of our young athletes, especially in the sport of rugby, in this country, a lot too early while they're still developing and don't really have the mental... Is
that partly because of your experience? Why did that come about? Why did Fozzie go to a school club?
Honestly, I don't know. I think about that a lot. I never... Well, I asked him, and he just played it, said, you were good enough, you were ready. And I was like, but, you can't have watched me that much. So honestly, I don't know.
Had you done any club as well?
No, never played a club game. Played first 15, and that was it. And I remember at the time, I played Waikato Secondary Schools tournament had been, and I remember, because they pick a Northern Regions side out of that, they used to pick two. Now they have Chiefs under 18s and Blues under 18s and the rest of it. But back then there'd be Northern Regions, there'd be an A and a B team, then there'd be Central Regions, which around that time was when they changed it to Hurricane Schools, and then they had a South Island team, and you played this quad tournament, and then your New Zealand Schools team was effectively picked out of that. The New Zealand School selectors would watch a lot of first 15 rugby throughout the year, especially when you're playing in the Super 8 and things like that, big traditional games. But so my next step, I thought, was, oh man, I hope I make Northern Region B, because I thought, being from Morrinsville, Hamilton Boys High was strong locally, but we weren't the best high school in Waikato at the time either. St. Paul's had our number for a couple of years, so I remember thinking and I think I said it to Mum on the phone when I rang to tell her that I had made Waikato. I was like, oh, guess what team I made? And she was like, oh, you made Northern Region Bs. And I was like, oh no, better than that. She's like, oh, you made the As. And I was like, no, better than that. She was like, what? We can't make New Zealand Schools because they don't name that yet. And I was like, no, I've been asked to play for Waikato. And she was like, oh, but you've already played for Waikato. And I was thinking schoolboy rugby, and I was like, no, I've been asked to play for Waikato. So it wasn't... I honestly don't know. But I remember, I suppose the real first... going there, I was super nervous. These guys were the guys I grew up watching on TV. There was John O'Gibbs and Marty Holler and Roger Randall, Bruce Rehana, these icons of Waikato rugby. Ian Foster was the hero when I was growing up as a kid. Waikato's most kept player, and John Mitchell, Warren Gatland, all these big names, and they had you got to remember they had not long retired. Ian Foster was not that long out of the game at this stage, so he was pretty young in terms of coaching. So I remember just going there and just seeing these guys like Greg Smith and Michael Collins, who's the CEO for the Chiefs now, and I was like, I don't belong here. And I thought that for a lot of years, post that first experience. But I remember going out to train like Todd Miller. He was my first roommate, and he played when we won the Shield in 1993. So
that was someone that had come from an amateur era.
Yeah. And then I was just like, so I was there with these guys, and I remember going out to training, and we had a drill, and it was just a catch pass drill, and I've always backed my catch pass. Like I spent a lot of time on it as a kid, and that was a big thing that Dad was really big on. God bless him. Thank you very much for that, Dad, because it helped me immensely through my career. But it was something he was really strict on. I always wondered why, but I guess he knew better, and it turned out to be a real strength of my whole career. Throughout my career, was my catch and pass. And we did this drill, and I remember one of the guys was like, it was Keith Lyon, I'm pretty sure, and he said, "Oh, do you want me to stand a little bit closer?" And I kind of looked at him, I was like, "No, I can throw it that far." I was like, no, you'll be right. And then we went and I just let this pass go, and everyone just kind of went, "Oh," like, and then went quiet, and they kind of held their breath, and I thought, "Oh shit, have I done it bad? Like, have I done something wrong?" And then later on found out that a few of the older guys have been talking, and then Ian Foster actually told me, he goes, when everyone held their breath when you let that pass go, it was because they didn't think you could throw it that far. And so I was that gave me a little bit like, okay, like maybe I'll be alright. And it was just, it's funny how little moments like that can change everything. Like if I'd thrown that past the ground, probably wouldn't be sitting here now, that it's simple as that sometimes in life. And I often think about little things like that at certain times of my career, when moments or occasions or performances that I've had at the right time, whether if that hadn't have happened, would I be sitting here now? And you can go back through time, probably back to when I was 5. That there's been moments like that where I've been like, I don't know whether life would have panned out the same if I didn't take that opportunity, or that mistake didn't happen, so then I fixed it. So
So was rugby the thing as 5-year-old?
Rugby was everything. My first experience was probably like a lot of young sort of 5-year-olds. Well, I think I might have been 4 actually when I started, but I didn't get on the field, didn't step foot on the field, stood by mum and dad, cried the whole time. That was my first game, first experience. Then from there on, like mum and dad joke about it a lot, and I still do it now to this day. Like everything, I've got to be presented well. Socks always got to be up. Always got to readjust my shorts or whatever. I don't know why. Back then we used to have the long sleeve jerseys. Couldn't play with my sleeves down. I always had to push them up. So if my sleeve ever came down, I'd stop, push it up. To the point where if I was running with the ball and my sleeve came down, while I was running, I would readjust my sleeve. And then as soon as I got tackled and a sock was down, I was pull the sock up first, then get up off the ground. I don't know.
So we on the presently, where'd the blue shorts come in, man?
Oh, those. Well, they actually came about from an injury.
Right.
So I had osteitis pubis.
Right.
So for those that don't know what osteitis pubis is, it's effectively all your core muscles and groin muscles attached to your pelvic area. So when you get osteitis pubis, effectively all those little finer muscles that stabilize your pelvis stop working. So you get this really bad pain because there's a little tiny gap in your pelvis, like in the middle, that moves. And when all those core muscles are there and they're firing, it's fine, right? But when they're not, that pelvis bone hits, and it's excruciating. Like, it's very painful, and there's nothing you can do for it. So I had it. I got it. You normally get it from overtraining, too much running, and I did a really big preseason in 2008, I think it was, and to the point, and I got super fit, like fittest I'd ever been, and then it was maybe 2 weeks out from, we played the Crusaders round 1 at Jade Stadium back then, and so I had this 2 weeks out, and I got a bit of a niggly groin, but I was like, this is weird. It's not
in the groin.
It's not in the groin. It feels like it's, like real, like central and real deep. And I was like, didn't think much of it. And I kind of warmed up, and then it kind of went away. And then did it again a couple of days later, it was really stiff sore in the morning, and then I'd just sort of jog and get warm, and then it would just disappear. But then it'd cool down, same again, and then I went to the physio, and he was like, uh-oh. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh.
Great result.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, it's nothing major, like I warm up and it goes away, and then I'm all good. And then, it turns out that that's a major. And what was happening, and I said, oh, sweet, how long until it goes away? And he's like, oh, it could go away tomorrow. And I was like, oh, sweet. Or he goes, or it could never go away. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? And he's just, so if I rest it, will it be gone in like 2 weeks? He's like, maybe, but maybe it'll still be there in 6 months. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what can I do? And he's like, oh, we can do all these core exercises and stability things. And so, I started that process and doing that, and kind of managed it, had to back off on my running load a lot, which was frustrating because I got super fit.
Yeah.
And felt like I was ready. I had a really, from my personal kind of reference, I guess, like I thought I played really well in my first year of Super Rugby in 2007. Yeah, so where were we? The blue tights,
Blue tights.
Yeah. So I had this injury, this osteitis pubis, and part of it was like, oh, well, there's these thermoskins, and it just so happened that the colour they gave me was blue. They had like a tanned colour, like a skin kind of colour.
Well, that's what you see heaps of the Aussie rules fellas.
Yeah. So it's an Australian company actually. So and no doubt probably came about from injuries like this and a lot of kicking and that kind of thing. So I had these, and they just so happened that the ones they got me were blue. So I wore these, and they were good. They kept my, I suppose, all my hip muscles and my lower core really warm, because they're like a wetsuit. That's the material. So they're like a, I don't know, for the surfers out there, like probably a 2 mil wetsuit with like a kind of like it's called a thermoskin, like on the inside of it. So it was really good because I could warm my groins up and that, get a little bit of deep heat on there, and it would keep them like real warm, And I suppose it kind of, probably more mentally than anything, it kind of felt like it was giving me protection and keeping my hips all tight and warm and the rest of it. So that's where the blue tights came from. And I remember, like, back to the injury, like I remember thinking, like, it went on pretty much all that season, most of the way into the next pre-season for the Chiefs again. I was just like, then by this point we were starting to like really manage my load and how much running I was doing, which was then not putting me in the best position to be able to demand a starting spot and perform and to push for higher levels and the rest of it, because I just wasn't doing enough, like off the field.
So it was 8 when you played for the Māoris?
2007 was my first year, and then played again in 2008. So yeah, big load. Like I was playing a lot of rugby, so I did Super Rugby, and I came off sevens the year before. So I played New Zealand Sevens in 2006, then Waikato, and we won in 2006. Then got picked for the Chiefs, then went in there, did a big pre-season with them, then played that Super Rugby, made the Māori All Blacks, did a tour to the UK, came back, played ITM Cup, I think it was back then, or Air New Zealand Cup, which back then was a lot more games. Like I think they were like sort of 15 game seasons, so like another half now on what you play. I think now it's like 10 or something. Yeah, so it was sort of like another 15 games on the back of that, then and again in 2008, and then that was when I did the really big pre-season in terms of my own time and my off time, and then got really fit then in another big pre-season, and then by this stage the injury kicked in. So then got through Super Rugby, then another Māori internal tour, which was the Pacific Nations Cup. And we played Tonga, Samoa, Japan, Fiji, and Australia and that was sort of here in New Zealand and in the islands and in Australia. That was a pretty cool year, because like not normally the Māoris don't normally get that long together, so to have that amount of time was pretty cool. Then played for Waikato again in 2008. This time, by that stage of the year, was really managing load, trying to make sure that, I could play, which, was hard, and like still wasn't a really established player. I was only my second year of Super Rugby, so and I wasn't, in the frames for the All Blacks or anything, so it's not like I could just demand a spot. Still was really fighting really hard, was playing a number of different positions, so I really wanted to, train as much as I could to put my best foot forward to be able to play. So yeah, that was frustrating. And then into 2009, and then sort of halfway through preseason, by this stage they're talking about fusing my pelvis, which is an option they can do. They go in and cut all the muscles, and they fuse it with kind of like chicken, not like chicken wire, but you know what they use on fences, like that metal when they just kind of smack it on. They use it for chicken wire, when they want to put it against the post or something.
Like a staples.
Like staples, when it's basically that system, and they staple your pelvis together so it stops that movement, and eventually it just fuses, and then they wrap it with wire to hold it still. But then you've got to retrain all your muscles again because they cut them off. They kind of just reattach where they reattach, and
so you'd be doing some postnatal physio classes.
Yeah, pretty much, So you do,
Join all the mums.
Yeah, exactly. So pull your belly button up to your chest and the rest of it. So that was an option, and that was something we're thinking about, because it didn't matter what I did, like it wasn't getting any better, but I suppose the one saving grace is it wasn't getting any worse, so I could still play, but I'd be very sore the day after. I still kind of got a habit now. I never used to be able to get out of bed, so I'd be lying on my back, and I couldn't just sit up. I couldn't do a sit up because the pain. So as soon as I engaged my core early in the morning when I wasn't warm, it would pull on that joint and it would be painful. So what I used to do to get out of bed or up off the bench press in the gym or off the floor if I was stretching, I'd have to pull my knee up and then leverage off that, so I wasn't using my core. So I'd pull my knee up and then kind of roll and then I could rock to sitting up and then over on one knee and then get off the ground. Once I was warm in like a game situation and things like that, I was fine. But if I wasn't really warm, it was like really painful. And I remember but I could still kind of feel it when I did that. But I remember one morning, because I remember the conversation that Dennis Shepherd, our physio, had it right at the start, and he was like, one day you could just wake up and it'll be gone. I was like, it can't just be gone. It is so painful. Like, it's horrible. I'd have to waddle around in the morning and, like getting out of bed, and couldn't even walk normally. It would be painful. So I kind of have to waddle. But once the sort of blood started flowing, and you kind of loosened up a little bit and your body sort of switched on, and I'd do a few little core exercises and different things, then I could get going. And then once I got to training, I always hated doing gym in the morning. I hated it. I'd rather go out in the field, because at least I could like jump on a bike and warm up and everything. But if we had to sort of get in meetings and then go straight into the gym, I really struggled, because it was like everything hurt. Even like I said, getting off the bench was painful, so I'd have to kind of roll off the side and go knees onto the floor.
Funny you saying that as well, because I swear I've seen videos of you doing that. In the gym, bench press and then rocking up. It's kind of funny. The things you didn't realise. And now you say, you're like, I have like a vivid picture of you doing that.
So it was a big part of my life for probably 12 months or close to it, maybe just over, just under kind of thing. And then I remember one morning I got up and I did my little trick, like threw the blankets off, grabbed the knee, rocked up, and then I kind of rolled over, and I was like, that didn't hurt. And I was like, normally it wouldn't be like really painful, but I could feel it. And I was like, oh no, I must have, I've just got used to it or something. And then I sort of sat up and I was like, oh, and then I kind of rolled off, like, sort of I used to kind of roll around off the side of the bed and put my knees like on the floor, and then kind of put one leg up and then sort of use the bed to get up off the ground. And I kind of put one knee up and I was like, oh, it feels all right. And then I just stood up and I was like, no way.
It's
like,
gone.
Oh my God. And I was like, nah, it can't be. And then so I just started like jogging on the spot, like beside my bed at like 6 a.m, like high knees on the spot. And I was like, oh my God, I can do high knees on the spot. That's not sore. And at the time I was living with Tim Mickelson.
Yep.
Yeah, so he was living with me, and I remember I ran down the hallway to. I was like, bro, my groin's fixed. He's like, loves sleeping in, and then he's just like, sort of wakes up. I like burst the door open. He's like half asleep. He had a pigsty of a room too. It's pretty funny. But he kind of rolls over and looks at me like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I'm just like running around the house doing high, and he's like, it's gone. The pain's gone. And I literally because we used to have a medical window early in the morning. And so the physios would be in there from like 6 o'clock kind of most days, especially when they had a big training day. And yeah, I remember I just grabbed my stuff, like chucked it in the car, didn't even worry about breakfast, just drove straight there and just walked into the physio room and just started doing high knees on the spot, hugging the physio, like, oh my God, it's gone. And he's like, well, don't jinx it, it might come back. But yeah.
Keep wearing the blue tights, mate.
Yeah. But then, yeah, the blue tights just became a thing after that. Like I kind of, in a way, I was almost kind of known for them because through that period, even though I was under managed load and stuff, I was probably playing, well, I definitely was at that point in time playing the best rugby I'd ever played. I was making, the Māori All Blacks and teams like that. Was started to, sort of started to start a few more Super Rugby games and things. So, yeah, they just became part of what went in my gear bag, and I am a little bit superstitious too. I used to be really bad, but not so bad now, but more of I'd say a routine that crosses into superstition. I've got a towel that not a lot of people know this, but I've got a towel that I've had since first 15. So first 15 we used to have towels that had our school crest on it, and then Hamilton Boys High School first 15, and then your number. And yes, I've got my year 13 towel, which has got number 13 on it. So that was my last year at Hamilton Boys High, and it's been to every rugby game I've ever played since first 15. So it's been all around the world with me, but I don't use it. It just sits in my bag. So yeah, it's there. I suppose it's there as an emergency towel, but I've never ever. I'm super prepared. I always have, I always take a towel with me if I need one. But yeah, it just lives in the bottom of my gear bag. It's been transferred between different teams in terms of like my Morrinsville bag that I play with, and then when I move into Waikato season or Chiefs season, then it would transfer over to that gear bag, and it followed me everywhere.
Man, where do you think the showing up and looking good comes from? I'm a bit the same. I'm pretty heady when it comes to like everything. I don't know, I'm a bit obsessive, but we had a football coach when I was growing up in Invercargill. We came out from Sunderland, not John Hewitson, doesn't matter, another John, Geordie lad, and that was one of the things he said to us, lads, look good, feel good, play good, and like that's just stuck with me for life.
Yeah.
Did you have somebody mentor that, or did you see something? Do you know?
Yeah. I guess in terms of, like, because I'm not super fussy on like kind of how I look anywhere else in life. Like I definitely don't dress up. Like, let's put it that way. Thomas is into me in terms of what I wear to work and stuff at times. And I know he probably wants to say a bit more than he does, but he bites his tongue a bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think something for me, and I remember Dad telling me very early on, and I definitely think that's a part of it is, and when he coached us, he was big on it, was like having pride in your appearances, showing respect to the jersey. So the team that you play for. So we always had to wash our boots. Like, that was a big thing in our house. And I do the same with my boys now. So I got two boys that play. One plays Ripper and one's playing first year tackle rugby. And we every Friday night, the three of us get our boots out. We clean them up, put them by the fire, and it's just become habit. Even if the fire's not on, I still put them by the fire. I've done that my whole career, right from when I was a kid. And I remember when I was a kid, I hated it. Like, but now I'm there doing my kids' boots. Like, it's just a part of, I suppose, the
becomes
routine.
A routine.
But Dad always kind of said to us and said to me, it shows pride in where you come from and the team that you're representing. Like, you make sure that, yes, you're going to get dirty, you're going to get muddy, but you can control how you turn up, and that was a big thing. And I think that's probably something I carried through my career in a number of different ways, is that I can control certain elements of, and definitely in terms of preparation. So if I can control that, then I can control that, and then the things you can't control, you can kind of live with. When you do, when you are focused on controlling the things that you can, when things kind of pop up, you become more aware that, that's something, if you turn up and it's a muddy day, you're not going to stay clean all day, but at least you turned up with clean boots. And your jersey tucked in and the rest of it. I suppose it's become a bit better in terms of jerseys getting smaller, because I haven't had to tuck them in, but back when they were bigger, that was another thing I always had to do. Had to tuck my jersey in, so I was always tucked in, socks up, sleeves up if they were a long sleeve, because I just didn't like them down. That wasn't really so much about appearance, it was just, they just annoyed me down.
So obviously you talked about controlling things you can control, and an injury that's has the possibility of affecting you your whole career is a distraction, but you sort of adapted and managed it, and as you said, still managed to play the best rugby of your life. And then you were talking about there's sort of two avenues that you thought of post rugby. How would you sort of feel that would go in business, and then also how would you communicate to that someone if it was a mentoring role? That what do you think those sort of lessons would why would that be so valuable to someone coming into the system? That's a good question. I suppose, in terms of, I think the only way that I had a long career was the fact that I didn't get hung up on things I couldn't control, in terms of selection, because at the end of the day, it's like one man's opinion. Eric Rush.
But it's so true. It's so true. And I think once you get higher the level goes, in terms of, people ask me this a lot, in terms of myself, are you gutted that you were never an All Black? Of course I was gutted. I wanted to be an All Black, but for me, I didn't want to be an All Black just to be an All Black. I wanted to be an All Black, I wanted to deserve that spot and to be the best, and I wasn't the best. Yes, I was good enough to be an All Black, I have no doubt about that, but in terms of the era that I played, when there were chances or opportunities, might not have played my best at that time, or wasn't even playing the position at the time. So my career was I played so many different positions at different times, because I had that versatility. When you're at that highest level, in terms of the All Blacks, they don't pick versatile players because you don't need it. You get an injury, you get the second best player to play that position. But when you're picking a Super Rugby squad, versatility is so helpful, because you can't just go and get the next best, because the next best is playing down. You might have the best centre, Richard Kahu is a good example. He was, on his day, the best centre in the country, and he was at the Chiefs, and centre was a position that I played at times. Was I better than him? No, but if he went, and it'd say I wasn't starting, and then Callum Bruce is at second five, and then one of those two go down, yes, you could have another centre, but could he play second five as well, or wing and fullback? So that became a very useful...
And kick goals, eh?
And kick goals, yeah. That became a very useful tool for that level, but for that next level, it's not something that coaches look for.
Yeah.
They look for the best, because they can, and the All Blacks are the best. I suppose... I kind of got digressed a little bit in terms of that, but controlling controllables, and that, I had no doubt that, that's a lie. I had doubt that, I wonder if I could foot it up there. I trained alongside these guys and played with them in terms of that super level, but I had no idea what international level was like. So I thought, on my day I outplay some of these guys at times, but what's that next level like? I might be able to outplay them at this level now and then, once a season or that kind of thing, but at that next level, is it just so much faster and so much better that even though I could outplay them here today, there's no way I could outplay them consistently at that level, or even once at that level. And it was when the Māoris got the opportunity to play Ireland and England in 2010 and got to play their test sides. So I played Ireland A and England A and Canada, Fiji and the Pacific Islands, but they're like, they're tier 2 nations. And back then the gap was a lot bigger than what it is now in terms of that tier 2 level. But to play Ireland and England, and when we played England, they'd just beaten Aussie for the first time in a test series in Aussie, I think maybe ever, or like 50 years or something. It was a very, like, if it wasn't ever, it was an extremely long time. And then played against them and outplayed my opposite by quite a long way. And we had an awesome game that night. When we played Ireland, I got man of the match. So I was like, oh yeah, I could play at test level, just not here. And I'm okay with that. So in terms of getting that opportunity that I got then helped me live with the fact that I wasn't going to be an All Black. And yeah, I was gutted. I would have loved to have worn the black jersey, but I wanted to wear it, if I wanted it, I wanted to be Conrad Smith. I didn't want to be Dwayne Sweeney that played one test.
Yeah.
Yes, that would have been awesome, and I never would have said no to that opportunity, but, I would rather sit back and, we all would rather be Conrad Smith, right? And have the career that he had. But I played through an era where we not even arguably, we had the best centre pairing of all time playing for the All Blacks. And that was my preferred position, was, second five or centre. But again, didn't play there a lot during that period, so wasn't really putting my hand up. But when I got an opportunity at that level, I was, pretty content that I could handle it and that I performed. So, yeah, in terms of controlling controllables, sometimes you need an opportunity to know that you are good enough and that you can be content with that. And then it came down to an uncontrollable for me, that I wasn't better than Conrad Smith and I wasn't going to be. So that was, I suppose, the original decision was made to move offshore at that point in time, and that kind of came from that. But I feel that, that was a kind of a long way around to the answer. But in terms of how it relates here, is rugby's a great sport for that. And especially, like I mentioned, if you want to have a long career, you have to be very good at being able to block out things you can't control, because there's so much media pressure, let alone now with social media pressure. Like when I started, there wasn't social media, but media pressure was enough, and that was hard to deal with. And then just public opinion. It was very hard to go to the supermarket or go watch Morrinsville play club rugby on a Saturday when we hadn't played too well on a Friday night. I remember vividly going to Hautapu, like your old team, after we played the Hurricanes here at the stadium on the Friday night, and I fronted up and ran water for Morrinsville, and I just copped it all day because Ma'anoni fended me off. And I just copped it from the crowd the whole game, 80 minutes, just relentless from a dozen different people. Oh, how did Ma'anoni's hand taste last night? But it's part of it, right? Because people care, and the only reason they say something is because they're passionate generally, or maybe they just want to be a dick. But there's not too many people like that. Most of the time, people just, and the only reason they're watching is because they love it and they want to watch it and they want to see the team do well, and it's kind of part of it that's going to come with it. So there's that, there's a lot of pressure and external factors that you can't control, and if you're going to get hurt by every comment like that, you won't last long. So you kind of
on the media pressure, and where does the sort of in your time, where was the sort of training around dealing with it? I know I listened to DG talk a couple of years ago about the social media pressure, and DG's Dave Galbraith, for those that don't know who that is, just crack up about saying, who cares? Who are you as a person? He's a legend. But where was the sort of idea and mentality around that? That person is just passionate. It's not about you. Yeah,
I suppose DG actually changed everything for me personally. He came in at a really key time of my career, which was around when I got my osteitis pubis. So around that injury was around the time he became involved with the Chiefs. So, but I wasn't the best defender when I started, and I was, even now, I can defend and I can tackle. but now my knowledge of defence outweighs the skill that I have. So I can get myself out of real shit situations a lot because I've seen the picture a million times, so I can adapt and move and foresee things that are going to happen, so you can put yourself in a better position, learn a lot of skills in terms of when you're doing it every day for a job. But when early on in my career, and it's something that I was really kind of shocked with, and a lot of people will resonate with me when I say this, is that we're never ever taught to tackle in New Zealand. Like we just learn, really, through osmosis. You get out there with because what 8-year-old, or Cooper's 7, my son just playing tackle, what 7-year-old can you teach to tackle? Like, there's such a complex skill, and their attention span
it's like cheek to cheek and go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all about bravery and courage, right?
Play some bull rush. And you'll learn.
And it's generally the kids that don't have a lot of fear and don't necessarily, they're quite tough little kids. Yeah. And I wasn't a super tough kid. And I was never really a super tough player either, right? Like, I never played the game, really, really physically. Even though I'm a bigger guy, I didn't play the game physically. I played it smart. I was clever. I used my size in different ways. So it wasn't... Yeah, it's crazy. Like, we're never... And because it is such a hard and complex skill, and there's a lot to it, you can't actually teach a 7-year-old kid to that much. So... You kind of have to learn on the fly.
Well, even as how old? I'll probably put it down to about 25. So I'd come from soccer, so that doesn't help.
Yeah.
And changed to rugby when I was 19. And just kind of played it by feel. Played it by lunchtime. Yeah, I'll grab one more.
Yeah.
Lunchtime rugby league, lunchtime bull rush. And then it wasn't until about 25 I'd had 2 goes at trying to play sevens for Southland, and it must have been 1 go. So 24. And I started watching Jamie Joseph videos, Wayne Smith videos, all those I don't know, it's coaching website videos, just on tackling, getting your feet in close, following your feet, squeezing, wrapping. I was oh, no shit. And just, the learning curve was amazing. But, I can't believe, a 7-year-old would be watch this video and see what you think.
There's, it. And even to that point, so what's delivered now in terms of you can go and watch a video, that wasn't around. There was no YouTube when I started playing professional rugby. So I remember going in, when I first going to Waikato training, even then, we didn't get taught how to tackle. You just got put in a drill and you go and tackle. There was no kind of process to it. There was no...
Well, even 32, we had Wayne Smith come along and teach us some more tackling.
Okay. So it's and that was something that I struggled with early on in my career. And most of it wasn't because I was... because I'd always kind of, growing up, I was actually quite good at tackling when I was younger, but then I kind of, I don't know, I just must have lost it somewhere in terms of the process to getting into good position. Yeah. It was never that I was scared or didn't want to make a tackle. It was just I would get myself in the most fucked up positions. And
how'd you find sevens then?
I didn't mind sevens because I could use angles and different things to basically... I played sweeper a lot, so I was at the back, so I could use different angles and push people towards the sideline. And there I was comfortable, tackling side on, sweet as. Front on, people with late footwork moving. Second 5 centre when you're running up and you got 4 decisions to make in that amount of time, you're and you kind of hope and you go one way, fuck, you in the other. There was... there's so much of tackling, especially at the highest level. It's all done before the ball even gets thrown in the lineup because you're foreseeing setup, you're reading body shape, you're reading body language, you're reading cues off different moves that they do so that you're ideally putting yourself in the best position. But when you're young, when I was young, I knew none of that. So all this was happening so quickly, and that's obviously when you get older, things slow down because you've done it all before the ball even comes in. You're like, oh, he's standing like this, he's there. Oh, they're likely going to run this move. The 2 options are he's going to get it short. For me, he's going to get it short, or they're going to go out the back, and then my job is to either tackle him if he comes short. If he doesn't get it, then my next job is to support Quinn, who's outside me, and I've got his inside, but I don't have the defend him, and then the winger, and then the fullback. But when you're young, you're like, oh, and then the ball, and you kind of, getting up in a shit position. But with DG, like I was really started to become really self-conscious of it because I was copping a bit of heat in the media for it and stuff. But DG just flipped my whole mindset. He was just like, fuck it, you're thinking about missing tackles before you even get on the field because you're worried about it. Like, who gives a fuck how many you miss? How many people are going to smash? Because you can smash people. And I was like, oh yeah, I can when I get it right. And he's like, we'll just count those. Who gives a shit? And then literally, just from that one conversation, and then he would keep count on the sideline, and I'd have to reference with him at halftime or full time, because he was always in the dugout and then in the sheds, and be running it at halftime, and he'd look at me and he'd just put 3 fingers up. Like, you got 3, and I'd be like, oh. And then, or he'd look at, 3, he used to call them snots. So how many people did you snot? And then, or he'd look at me and be like, give me the gesture, like, how many you think? And I'd be like, oh, 2. And then he'd like shake his head, and he's like, 3 or 4, And then it just changed my whole psyche around it. And then it became, like, I went looking for tackles, and my whole mindset changed. It went away from being afraid to make tackles only because I was scared of failing to like, fuck, how can I smash somebody else? It was never, I was never scared of big guys or like Ma'anonu and people like that. I was just scared of what other people would think when I missed. But then as soon as I flipped that around and went, how can I get my hands on him? Like, oh, I'd love to smash Ma'anonu. Like, how am I going to do that? And it literally changed just from one conversation with DG at the right time, obviously. And it just, changed my career. Like literally in 20 seconds. Yeah. And it just became like a mindset thing. So it was, I don't know if there's anything to that in terms of when you talk to somebody, or maybe it's just the way you say it that makes you not worry about the outside perspective, and then you focus internally and you flip it, because that's all it was. I was still copping it, because I was probably, I was still missing tackles, but then all of a sudden it was those snots that start to outweigh the misses, and then there's all of a sudden it's like you have a good game and you make 8 snots and you don't miss any, and then everyone's like, whoa, he's a wicked defender, and this is like, well, 2 weeks ago, oh shit, but things change quite quickly.
No, it's funny you sort of said about like how rugby is such a great teacher, and sport, in fact, that's what Waterboy is all about. It's just such a great teacher, and I'm in the middle of Dr. Paul Wood's new book, and it's about mental fitness.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just been a real sort of culmination of the lessons I've learned in life, reading through this book. Majority of those have been from sports. And it's just like, so, I feel really grateful for, playing so many sports, being from a place like Invercargill where you could, do 3 sports in one day, and then to read out this information which is there to help a lot of people and go, far out, this stuff makes sense. Shit, this is good. So like that, I guess that kind of leads into what I was asking about the business mindset about, and what Nab sort of said to you, that you're the man for the job. You've got the skills. Let's go execute on them. Like, what was the nervousness about getting into, say, inverted commas, corporate environment? Yeah,
well, I suppose like the the nervous part of it was for me is that I'd never lived in the environment, so I'd never been in a boardroom where I love it now. I love meetings, and I love going to meet new sponsors and things like that, and tell them about what we do and see what interests they have in it and how they align to it. But I was so anxious to do that until I did it. And then, I don't know, same thing. Maybe it was timing. First experience was a good one. But I don't know. We kind of talk about this like internally here, because we've just onboarded a new person that does 20 hours a week. Well, she actually does like 35. Like she, very fortunate, Eileen. She's awesome. Her and her husband actually sponsor the Waterboy as well, and she wanted to get back in the workplace but wanted to do something meaningful, and she was like, I want to be involved with the Waterboy. I don't need a lot of money, but I just want to make a difference. So which is ideal because we don't make a lot of money here at the Waterboy, but that's one thing we do is we make a difference, and it doesn't feel like going to work. I say it all the time. Like everyone's like, "Oh, how's your new job going?" And I was like, "Well, it's not really a job. Like, I love it. Like, I love going to work, and it's hard to leave." And that's another balancing act because you become very so invested because you can clearly see the difference that you're making.
You're all shit. We're surrounded by pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just got to look at one of those and then you're like, oh, your eyes start welling up, in terms of these kids and the opportunity that we give them. But yeah, like having Eileen come on and do what she has been doing. She's got a great network. Her and her husband, very successful business, and through that they've got a lot of good connections, and she's been able to onboard some great new sponsors, and just because she knew that their values would align to what we do. And then people will say oh man, and then same likewise with me, I've been able to open a few doors through my past playing history because people in the community know me for that, so it makes it a little bit easier at times to get that first initial meeting. And then people are and then even Thomas made the comment, he's like, oh man, you guys are just on fire, I need to stay out of your way. And it's like, we're not on fire. We literally use our names to open the door. The Waterboy gets the effective, well, we'll say sale for a lack of a better word, but we'll onboard the new sponsor because the Waterboy is the product. And that's why I say it doesn't seem like work because you're just going in and telling them how good sport is, and how good it is, and that there is actually some people out there that don't get that opportunity. It kind of blows a lot of people away that they don't get it, but they see the value straight away because they know they one day, most of those people, I would say every single one of our sponsors got something from sport at some point of their life, whether it was a mate that they became very close with or whether it was a scholarship to a big private school, and then they used that to further their education, or it gave them an opportunity to, instead of going to a small public school in Morrinsville or Cambridge or whatever, they all of a sudden a door opened to go to Hamilton Boys High School or Hamilton Girls High, and bigger networks and all that kind of, and that comes from a kid. I got into Hamilton Boys High because I applied, but also I have a pretty fair understanding that I probably got in on my sporting ability because I was playing rep cricket and rep rugby at the time, and that does help when you want to apply into bigger schools because that is quite a big focus at high school in terms of sport, is they want to be successful and in terms of that, so they are always looking for that next kind of group of talent and whatnot. So yeah, there's so many good avenues that sport gives, but in terms of transferring my skills and that into the environment, I've been actually quite surprised that how well it transfers over in terms of the one-on-one conversations I have with staff members around that awareness of controllable, uncontrollable is probably the biggest thing that I've taken out of sport that I transfer into corporate life. Is we have frustrations like everybody does in the workplace with different things, and it's as simple as most of the time going, can you control that? And then it's a simple little thing like, oh yeah, I could do this, and I was like, we'll do that then, and then what difference is that going to make? And then that'll fix this area, and then I can focus on that, and then cool, okay, that's a step forward, so take that avenue. Or can you control that? No, that's fully on the other person or fully on the other organisation or the sponsor or whatever it may be. And it's well, we can't control that, but what we can control is what we do right here, right now, in terms of this little part of the equation. And then it's you focus on that point, and then all of a sudden that other part ends up coming back around and wants to be involved again or sees the value or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's just, that's probably the biggest thing I've taken from that I've learned through my rugby career into the corporate world, is being able to sit down, especially in a one-on-one situation. I tend to work quite, and that's really my main role within the walls here, is to sit down with the team and empower them to do their job really well through open and honest conversations, and supporting them where I can, and making them aware of the good job that they're doing, or the areas that they might need a hand with, and then how we can do that, and problem solving and that kind of thing. But I don't have the answers. They've got all the answers because it's their role and it's what they do. So I just sit down and pull them out of them, and then they're like, oh, well, we could do this, and it's oh, that sounds good. And then they think, oh man, that's so good. You told me what to do, but I'm like, nah, I actually didn't. Like, I'm just making it up. I had no idea when we sat down how I was going to help, but through conversation, and that's a big part of why I love this, like love podcasts, because you learn so much. Or what I personally learn a lot in conversation and bouncing ideas off different people, and then think, oh, that's an interesting way to do it, and like, oh, I never knew that about somebody. So. Yeah.
Something that comes to mind for me is kind of like people look at the game of rugby and think, oh, you just do the same thing when week in, week out, score more points than the opposition and you come away with a win. So, to use the post-match cliches, but you're continually learning, continually growing. You're identifying a problem. You're doing something about it. You might go back and look at research of, and it's not inverted commas research in a journal, but it's tape, or what have people done, what has different skills been, what have different plays been in the past, and how can we effectively solve the problem so that, hey, we can go and score more points than the opposition. And over a 20-year period, you've countlessly learned how to problem solve. We're talking about defence before, whether that was mental or physical or skill based, there were some pillars there that you had to address, and it came away with being a better player. It's the same when it comes to anything, and like you're talking about in a team, converting that to whatever skill it is. And I think, a long career of sport, or, for myself, 8 till 30 playing amateur sport, all those things is practicing the skill of identifying problems, working on it, getting better, moving on, next time, carrying on. And so then when you go to your working life, you're like, well, I can succeed if I identify it and put in the work.
Yeah, and like what I love about sport, and this is, I reckon, the biggest thing that people take out of it, is exactly what you just said then. So in terms of like finding a problem, then you work on a solution, and then you get to execute it. So sport gives you that on a weekly most sports basis, it gives you it on a weekly basis. You do it in business, it's annual if you're lucky. Sometimes it's like 5-year plans and that kind of thing, and it's like, okay, we've identified a problem, in 5 years we want to be past that problem, and then it's like, but you get to year 3, you're like, what was our problem? Because different things pop up and evolve and change. But in terms of sport, like, it gives you that accelerated learning, feedback, and constant feedback. Like, I think about it constantly in the way that we train, because we have an outcome focus of what we want to get out of training. We don't just go and train. So whether it be, even if it's a fitness training, it's outcome focus. So there's a certain amount of meters that we want to run in a certain amount of time. So straight away, it's you've got something to leverage off. So it's like, okay,
Even though it's going to hurt like hell, but at least you're going to know where you stand, right? You don't just go out there and run, and then the trainer's like, oh, you didn't do that well today. And it's like, oh, why not? And it's like, well, you missed all the times. I was like, oh, what was the times? Because the times. They're like, you should be hitting this. So then you go out. But if you went out and did a whole fitness session and the trainer never told you nothing, didn't give you any benchmarks or any targets, you would just do that fitness session and you could smash it out of the park if you got lucky, or you could be like, oh, well, he's not actually on me. And human nature, most of the time you're going to slow down and cruise, because you're like, oh, well, like, he's not telling me off for not being there in time, so I must be doing all right. And I think that's what happens in business, because there's so often it's hard to get those, when you have a big goal, it's hard to get a close marker or what does that change look like. And I think that's something that we're trying to work on a lot here in terms of the organisation, and that's something I've purely taken out of my sport career, is that you need those constant little checkers or markers that, okay, like, yes, we want to get fitter, but how do I make sure I'm getting fitter this Monday, and I don't wait till 4 months or 3 months time or 4 weeks time when I get tested. Like, if we've got those little markers along the way, then it's easy to see if you're kind of staying on track. But I think it's like, it's harder when it's in a bigger kind of picture and in business and corporate world, especially with us here, because it grows so fast. What is growing so fast, it's hard to
like the goal's constantly moving, and it's like, oh yep, sweet, we need to nail that, and then we're like, oh, and then all of a sudden like, oh, that needs attention right now because otherwise it's not going to happen for us. So then you go dive over there, and then all of a sudden you're like, get sort of 2 weeks down the track, and like someone goes, oh, what about da da da, and you're like, oh shit, like, oh, that was meant to be done yesterday, and it was like 3 weeks ago that we forgot about it because something else was more important. So yeah.
Do you think the ability to seek feedback and take on feedback is a good one? Like,
huge.
And there's probably that jump of amateur to professional, like you're talking about, the coaches and watching. But that self-accountability that needs to happen in a professional environment.
Yeah, definitely, because I suppose you get... and I would talk about it a lot. Like, I've talked with a few different guys that I've played with that have transitioned out, and they're all in like leadership roles, or they own their own businesses and that kind of thing, because you're kind of set up to do that. You've got the skills to do it through a professional career, especially if you play for a decent period of time. Like you develop these skills, and what they find is that so many people that they deal with have never been told that they're not good enough.
And like, constantly be told.
But we've been told like daily, like literally, like I don't know how many times a day I got told I was like too fat, too slow. Oh, why'd you drop that for? Like, should be more focused here. Like, where were you? That running line was wrong. You should have been here. Like, it happens a dozen times a day, like at bare minimum, sometimes 50. Like, so you're used to hearing that all the time, and then you process it and move on. So it's like, okay, I hear that, and I think it's a skill that a lot of the younger players are struggling with now, and coaching's kind of changed. It's not as old school as it used to be when I started. You just got told, like, if you're not in the right position, you got told, and it was all good. Senior players would be like, "Oi, Sweens," and it was blunt and it was to the point, but you learnt quick. You know, you're like, okay, that's not where I need to be, so I better fix that, and you kind of move on. Where now it's like you can't say that anymore. Like, and you're like, well, why not? He's not in the right place, and it's like, oh yeah, but you've hurt his feelings now, and now his like confidence has gone down. I understand we need to be more mindful, but in terms of that high pressure environment, when you know, like you're thinking Super Rugby games. I look at the All Blacks game the other night. We went there and there was over 20,000 people there, and I added it up at an average of $50 a ticket, which the average will be higher. That's $1 million of gate takings, just gate takings, let alone sponsorship,
and
let alone player salaries, TV rights, you know? Yeah. So it's like there's big bickies on the line there. Like, those guys don't pussyfoot around and say, oh, can you please run this line? It's like, you run the line or you're gone, you know? So it's like, I just don't feel, you know, sorry to go back in a circle, but like, in terms of the environment we're creating with the, I suppose, almost like professionalism in high school rugby, and these kids come out because they call it training age, and they've been training in a you know, like they've done the workload of a professional rugby player for a year or two in their first 15, and the amount of training time that they do, and they spent time in the gym and the rest of it. I'd never been in a gym before I played for Waikato, and they think that, because we've done that, they're in a position to play, but it's all the other stuff that comes with it, and you know, the pressures of being told that you're not good enough that's hard, and it's a skill that you got to learn, because you need to be able to bin that it's personal and think about a bigger picture in the team, but it takes a little bit of time to get that. Where I did it out of fear because I was the only one, so I literally didn't want to put a foot wrong, you know. Yeah. But it's I was quite surprised. Like I caught up with Ella de Malmonte, Brendan Leonard, Callum Bruce, Murray Williams. So we all played in the Chiefs together. We all actually, Callum came the year after, but we all debuted together. We caught up for breakfast a couple of weeks ago down here, and they're all in successful roles. Callum owns a Foursquare down in Te Anau. Brendan Leonard owns Snap Fitness in Ham East. Ella's working like really high up for the council and like running projects and that kind of thing. And Murray Williams is like, he looks after like a region for Hines or Waddies or something like that. So, and then Murray's like in charge of hiring, and the last 4 people he's hired have been athletes, and he said the only reason he hired them is because he can tell them when they're not doing something wrong, where everyone else, like if he got sick of pussyfooting around trying to get them like in a passive aggressive way say we need this done, like where with the athletes he can be like, you need to do this, and then if they don't hit it he can be like, I told you need to do this, it's not good enough, and they're like, yeah, okay, and they go around and they're used to that, so they go back, process it, they find a solution or have the conversation and nut it out, and it doesn't become emotional, it becomes like factual. Okay, yep, that's not good enough, how do we change it then? It's like, well, you need to focus on this and this.
Well, this is what I need.
Go forward.
You need.
Yeah,
they can give and take feedback.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I've but we've kind of, I suppose in our kind of circle of friends, kind of figured out that, you know, that's one good skill that we gained through our careers, because we just got used to being told you weren't good enough. Like, I don't know if it's a good thing, but I don't know, it helps process and deal with problems a lot quicker because you take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Like, as you say, you know, there's probably some things in the world that do need to change, but then when it comes to the crunch, we sort of idolise the likes of the SAS. That it's straight up, they've been in a pressure cooker situation. They're the people. What does Jargon say? Break in the case of emergency type people. Like, yeah, if shit goes wrong, I want to be beside that person.
Yeah. It's funny, So we, because we do a lot here at the Waterboy around inclusion, and there's a difference. I think there's a difference in terms of what we do here at the Waterboy. Like, we're about participation, so we want as many people being involved as possible in terms of sport. So that's the dream. Every Kiwi has the opportunity to participate in sport, and if there's a barrier, then we're here to break that down. So that's what we stand for, and that's what we focus on doing, and we go about it, and everything comes back to that. But what we're talking about here is people that are running corporate organizations and businesses and in charge of like big, you know, multi-million-dollar companies, and that they're not about participation, they're about like results. They're in the pressure cooker, they're excellence. Very, very different. Like, and there's a clear chain of command, for lack of a better word, you know. And professional sport is that. Like, yes, there needs to be inclusion because you need to be able to feel like you belong there, but you still got to earn that right to feel like you belong. Like, I felt like I didn't belong for a long time, and it was probably warranted because I personally wasn't in a like really strong self-confidence place, but I worked out a way to fix that. So I was like, yep, there's a reason I don't feel like I belong here. It wasn't because I got told I wasn't good enough, it's because I knew I wasn't good enough. So
that's why the words hurt.
Yeah, because exactly that. So if I was really confident in myself and what I was delivering, when someone would say something, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. I just bin that because I know internally I'm like, nah, I'm confident with what I'm doing. This is good. But when people are saying it and you know it's true, that's when it that's when it kind of stings. Because it stings. But then I suppose when you're a professional, when I was in that situation, when I knew I hadn't done something right, I was totally fine for someone to say that, because I got to a point where I was way harder on myself than what anyone else would have been, because you had to be to survive. And I'd imagine like the SAS are exactly like that. Their mate would not have to tell them that you should have been there or you should have done this in that time. Like guarantee their internal process knows exactly where they should have been, because they have a job to do and a role to play. So I definitely think there's a time and place and a certain responsibility when you get into a position of leadership or power. Power is probably not the best word, but in terms of leadership or a professional environment where there's, you know, high risk, high reward,
an expectation
that yes, you should be able to be told what to do, and you should be able to process that. And if it doesn't sit well with you, you should be able to process it and then deal with it without emotion. I think that's a big thing, because that's a hard thing to do too. So quite often things get said and then you're like, oh, the emotion takes over, and then you snap back and then you have an argument about it, and then it turns out that what was said you actually agree with, but in that time you couldn't process the emotion out of it, so it hit differently. But I think, and when you're in that situation enough and you deal with that enough, you learn how to pull the emotion out and detach it. Because I used to get really emotional when I got feedback from coaches in my early days because I didn't feel confident enough in myself. So when they gave me feedback, even though I knew it was coming, it would like upset me. But then when I got to a position when I was confident in my own skills and ability, and I'd proven to myself that I deserved to be there and was good enough through my actions, through the work that I'd put into my performance or preparation, that I could live with it, because I'm like, oh yeah, sweet, like yeah, I was expecting that because I know that wasn't good enough, but I also know that it's not going to define me because I'll get better at that. I'll be better next week. And I think that's why that like experience thing is a big part, and why coaches like experienced players, because they know that they can give them that straight feedback. They'll be able to process it. And most of the time, they don't even say it because they know that you know. And they're just like, oh, Sweens, you're going to fix that, eh? And you're like, yeah, don't worry, I got it. Like, yeah.
So that's sort of like all a growth mindset, and sort of changing tack a little bit. Like, you've lived this dream of being a rugby player, still are a rugby player. And then to like go into something like podcasting, to go into something like big game fishing, like what's the thought process of like, I can do some more of my dreams?
I don't know. Like, I think because it kind of taught me that process is everything. We've talked about that a lot through this podcast. I feel like, I don't know if I've mentioned the word a lot, but it all was just the process. So and through my podcast, I've learned that about so many different things in life. And to be fair, like, my podcast has probably helped me in the corporate world, because sitting down with the 3 directors of Raglan Roast, a big successful company, and the way that they think and the way they look at things and how they value people, and then same with Good George, I'm like, oh man, they operate just like a successful rugby team does. Like, and that was something I learned through when I was working in rugby alongside playing in rugby, so working in community rugby. I got asked to do this presentation on team culture, and I was like, I don't even know what culture is. Like, Jordan Farrington actually asked, he goes, oh, you can do the culture segment, Sweens, and kind of thought,
it must be like, you played for the Chiefs.
You know what team culture is about. And it wasn't until he said it, but I didn't actually know. I definitely knew what it felt like when it was good and what it felt like when it was bad, but I didn't know what defined the difference. And I literally like Googled it, and culture, like when you Google the word culture, lots of different things come up, but the one that came up and stuck with me, it was like the characteristics and behavior of a particular social group. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, now I've got something to work off. And I built this presentation around behaviors and expectations. And it just came together like nothing else. Like, I literally, I've always kind of been comfortable to speak in front of a crowd and that, and I think that's just through media training. I never used to be when I was younger, but you do it, you talk enough on live TV, you kind of get used to like watching your words and saying the right thing at the right times, because you're conscious of it, and then it becomes like a little bit of a habit. But I delivered this presentation, and a lot of it was just storytelling. Like, I had images to back up what I was saying, and I told the journey of our Waikato 2018 team. So the year before, 2017, was my first year as captain. I got injured and we got relegated. First time ever. Waikato's longest ever losing streak. So we lost our first 3 games in the start of 2018, but we'd changed so much of the behaviour characteristics of our group, not necessarily the way we played. Little things had changed. We had the exact same attack plan. Defence changed a little bit, but everything changed off the field in terms of the people that we were and the way that we were in an environment. And then we went on this run, and we ended up winning the Rainfield Shield. We ended up losing it to Otago, but then turn around and give them a hiding in the championship final, and the first team ever to get relegated, then promoted within a year. But it was all around just our behaviours and characteristics off the field and the people that we became. So it was like, through Geordie just throwing me this task, I went through, I found out something that I just found a starting point. So it was something I knew what it felt like. And I suppose you could say the same with like marlin fishing and whatnot. Like you kind of, you know what it looks like or feels like if you've had the chance, but there's like a whole process to it. And then, just going through and peeling it all back and just coming back to behaviour characteristics of a particular social group, I was able to put into words and to images of particular behaviours and characteristics that happen on the field that the general public would not notice. But when you could break it down and put it into, this is what we were as a team, this is what we stood for, this is the way we behaved, this was a big part of our identity. And then when you can play a video of the game and be like, from the wide view we see all the little things off the ball and the little key parts that creates the opportunity for Severis to score 4 tries, but there's like props doing this and locks doing that, and when you can picture all that and put it all together, then it landed really well. And then people are like, oh my god, like that's, and then through that I just got talking to different people in like business, I suppose, organizations, and it like for us it kind of came down to, at certain times it was defense or attack or whatever. But in terms of like, you got to figure out what your try is and then find the behaviours and characteristics that are going to help you get that try. And then you can kind of build it that way. Yeah.
And so you talk about it.
I went off on tangent.
No, that was good, man. That was good. So you talk about like it being a try. Do you think that that's actually the process of a rugby game? It's about scoring the try?
Yeah.
Like it's not actually getting the win?
No, it is. Like, and that's the key thing that I talk about all the time. In terms of rugby players, we don't even talk about like results. It's all process. So we don't sit in a room and say, oh, we got to win this week. We sit there and say we need to do X, Y, Z, and we need to do X, Y, Z. Then defensively we need to focus on X, Y, Z. Set piece, that's what this is going to look like. This is what it's going to look like for us in attack, and that's about process. We don't even talk about results. We know that process done right, because we do our homework, that will get result. And then if we can control what we can control and we nail all those processes but still lose, like we couldn't have done anything else, because we did everything that we could have done,
or we didn't.
But or we didn't, So, and then it's real interesting because the Ranfurly Shield game like is a really good example, because something happened in that game with a particular player. And I get asked about it a lot. They're like, oh, that particular player cost you a Ranfurly Shield. But it wasn't, because we missed so many opportunities. Their first 3 tries, we practiced all 3 of those moves defensively on what we were going to do, because we knew that they were their strike plays. They scored on all 3 of them. It was the only tries they scored. But all we did that week was practice those 3, and we missed all 3 cues. So I was like, it had nothing to do with what happened in the 78th minute. It's what happened in the first 15 minutes. We missed everything that we prepared for, and that ultimately gave them the win. Yes, little moments happened further down the track, but if we'd nailed those 3 tasks, we were the better team.
And possibly even one task.
Yeah, we were the better team for 65 minutes of that game. We would have won, but because we gave them a head start, everything kind of changes, because we missed the cues that we'd trained for. So
missed one task 3 times.
Exactly. And all we had to do was look. It was that simple. It was all we had to do was look. They did it exactly the way that we trained it. I seen 2 of them unfold, and I was just like, what are we doing? Like, they're seriously going to go back that way. It was like a hit and switch play that they had, and there was one person that gave it away from before the lineup was even thrown in, and it was like where he stood was like, yep, they're going to go back. It's like, yeah, sweet, going to go back. All right, they cash midfield. I'm standing in the midfield, like on the far side of the ruck, and I look, and there's like 4 forwards looking at me running around the corner, and I'm like, none of yous were meant to come around the corner. And I was like, uh-oh. And then I'm like, turn around. But
seeing it unfold before your eyes.
Yeah, things just like that.
Now, so what's the try when you go and sport fishing?
It's catching the fish. Like, the try is catching the marlin. Well, it used to be for me finding one. That was a big thing for me. Like, I was, I love getting out there. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy catching them, but I get so much of a buzz out of actually getting a bite from a marlin, or knowing that there was finding an area, because it's a big ocean, right? You can go and drive out there and just, if...
Mate, I was listening to you and Paul talk on that episode. I messaged you after. I was like, I don't fish, but holy cow, that was exciting. And people have seen the photos I've put up of being in the car workers, and you're just sitting on an outlook and you're looking across this vast array of bush and mountains, and you go, they could be bloody anywhere.
Yeah.
And
but you learn what to look for, right?
Yeah.
So you'll look at that face very differently than Joe Blogs will look at that face of bush. You'll be like, oh, I reckon there'd be a deer there, and that'd be a good spot in the afternoon when the sun hits that way and whatnot. Just like
same
fishing.
with fishing.
Yeah, exactly the same. Except the hard thing with fishing is you can't see
what you're
looking for.
Yeah.
So you can see to certain elements, we're pretty lucky now in terms of electronics. We can see a bit more.
Is there undersea mapping?
Yep, there is.
There is?
So there's GPSs and...
No, but for going hunting, we bring up a type of map and a
exactly the same
satellite
for fishing.
image.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you don't get you can't get a satellite image, but you can see that you can map the bottom floor. So in terms of game fishing and sport fishing, targeting marlin, you're out there at sea, you're looking for areas that certain currents will hit, and they create an upwelling, because you need to catch a marlin, you need the fish to be up on the top, because that's the only area of the water we can fish efficiently. So we're trolling around lures, you can't go out, it's not like a snapper spot where you go out and be like, all right, yep, that looks like a good rock there should be some snapper there, we'll go out, we'll anchor up, we'll put some burley over, put some bait, and we'll just wait. There'll be a snapper. With marlin, you need to sort of cover ground because they're pelagic and they move. But what I have found is that they are just like snapper. So if you get one there, they'll be there the next year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but they might not be there on the same day. You know what I mean? So but they'll be there again. So most of my fish that I catch are all pretty close to each other in terms of might be the size of Hamilton city centre.
Yeah.
Kind of area out of Raglan, then most of the fish will be caught in that kind of area. So it's yes, it's a big area, but it's not a big area when you're doing 7-8 knots, which is 15 k's an hour. Sort of cruising up and down and around, and you notice things. Might see some a ball of bait on the sounder, and sometimes you'll see a marlin. They come up like a big arc on the sounder. You sometimes see them on the surface, especially at Raglan. You see that a lot. So you'll see some gannets sort of circling and diving, and then you'll see marlin feeding on the surface and their tails out of the water and jumping out of the water, and that's pretty exciting, So a big for me it used to be just the try was getting a bite, going to an area and being like, oh yeah, I reckon it looks quite good here, and then you're patient and you wait it out, and then one comes up and you get a bite. Now the process is extended out. I wanted to catch them anyway, but even if I didn't, I was pretty content with that was cool. At least I saw one. I wasn't out there wasting my time. I actually was in a good area. But now the tries, the goal line was kind of moved, and it's more to catching them, and there's a lot of different elements to that. But same thing again, it's just the process. A big part of it is finding the area. Huge part of it is the biggest part of it is patience, trusting your gut. And once you learn to know, or learn what to look for, just trusting your gut and just being really, really patient. And all the top game fishermen or hunters, different people in that kind of realm, even rugby and athletes, I've noticed that they're really, really persistent and patient. So they will, if they've got a goal or they've got something they want to achieve, the best fishermen will stay there longer than anyone else. If they see what they they won't move, and they'll be content to not catch one too. Because they know when you're out there that many days and you do it enough and you're effective at it, you know what you're looking at is right or wrong, and you have a genuine gut feeling. So, the best will stay there. I got a chance to fish with Matt Watson, and we fished this area, and there was 9 boats there, all doing the exact same thing, trying to catch swordfish. And we did, a few different drifts and whatnot. And there was like I said, 9 different boats. Then all of a sudden, all the boats except one moved. They all moved over. Like we could still see them, but they kind of moved. We were fishing in this sea canyon, like this kind of like a valley. It's out in like 500 meters of water, and then but it looked good. Like, and everybody on their boats would have had pretty similar gear, so they would have known what they were kind of looking at, and it looked like there should be a swordfish there. And they would have all been seeing the same thing. So, but they all moved because they didn't get a bite. We went around, put another bait over because I noticed that everybody had moved. I was like, "Oh, we'll get a fish now." He's like, looks at me. He's like, "Why do you say that?" And I was like, "Well, everyone's gone." And then he's like, "Oh, well, but why did you say that?" And I was like, "Well, we're going to get a bite because we're more patient. Like, there's obviously a fish here. Like, it looks like there should be a swordfish here. You're telling me it looks better than what it did last week, and you caught 2 here, so there must be a fish here." And he was like, he just looked at me. He's like, "I like the way you think, Sweens." And then 2 minutes later, hooked up, and we caught a swordfish. But it was just the only reason we caught that fish, and no one else did, is because we stayed. Because he saw what he saw. He's done it enough times to know that looks good, and he was patient. And that was a big thing that came through his podcast, was just to anybody. He said to anyone, like, trust your gut and just be patient. Like, fish it hard and target what you want to catch and just commit to it and stay there. So, like, if you want to seek a stag, for example, go hunting the kawikas. Don't go the ruahinis, because you know what I mean? Like, it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're like, "Oh man, I really want to seek a stag." It's like, well, why do you hunt the ruahinis every second week? Go to the kawikas every weekend. Like, if that's what you want to do,
and that's what I did do.
Yeah,
and like you say, you start patenting and start getting onto things, and it's funny you're talking, like, obviously going out with Matt Watson's, you get to be the student for a little while, but how are you starting to feel about sharing your experience gained with other people? Because it's sort of I was doing that while I was in Hawke's Bay. I was going up to the kawikas, going to the same spot, staying in basically the same area, depending if it was raining or not. Yeah. And going back to the same face, because it looked like, and I'd seen deer on it, and not at the right time, but it was like, right, there is deer there, and I've got to do it, and I've got to be there to be able to shoot a deer. If it's raining and shitty, well, I'll learn something. And then I've started to go with people, take people, and just start bouncing ideas off. How do you sort of feel about the gaining all the knowledge, going out with Matt Watson, learning a bit? Yeah. And then it's now like people must be going, "Sweet, I'll come fishing with you, mate."
Yeah. No, it is. And I suppose a big thing for me, and that's one part of it I really do enjoy. And like I said to you before we started this, like, I'm an open book. Like, I'll share all the tips, tricks, knowledge that I pick up along the way, and I'm not going to take credit for stuff that I didn't invent either. Like, I'm not going to go and be like, "Oh, I'm a guru at marlin fishing," because I ain't. Yeah. But I love it, and I'm the way I word it is, I'm like, because people say, "Oh, you're the man at catching marlin." Now I'm not. I'm far from it, but I'm like a try hard. That's it. That's my best way to explain myself. So I try really, really hard at everything that I want to do. So if I want to do something, that persistence, that perseverance, that's in me, and that's what, like, I will just do it until I can get it right, and I almost obsessive compulsive, and I think a lot of athletes have that in them, and I no doubt it played a huge part in my rugby career as well. But then I also love being able to share what I learned. So you listen to the podcast I did with Paul, like, I was literally just regurgitating what I'd learned from people that I know that did it as a job. Yeah. So I'm lucky enough that I've been able to, with my network, create a group of people around me that are very, very good at it, and I just pick their brain and ask them questions. I've done a podcast with a few of them as well, so I've been able to share that knowledge with a larger group. And I've had a number of people message me after listening to, like, Bonds Graham Fleet's podcast and Matt Watson's one, and then they've gone out fishing and they've had success because they've listened, paid attention to somebody, or, like, I've given a platform to somebody that's got some really good knowledge and asked the right questions to get them to share in depth, how they kind of go about things or what they focus on, and how to, like, kind of how to. like, yeah, you can watch like a how-to video, but what Matt doesn't say in his videos is how important it is to trust your gut and to be patient and to target what you want to target, and the little gems that you kind of pick up on the way. And I love going out now with people that are either like starting to get into it or have got no idea about it, and they ask questions and like, oh, why are we fishing here? And I'll be like, oh, we're going to stay here because of XYZ. I reckon this looks like, the current's going to start running here soon. There's lots of bait here. The tide's coming up. It's always a good time around the tide. Like, so, and then the amount of times I've said that this year and it's paid off. Like, I remember like the last trip I did out, when I caught a marlin, I took my cousin out who lives in Spain, or Germany now, sorry, he's Spanish, but he came back and he's been wanting to come out for years, but with the whole COVID thing, he decided he would come home for like 4 or 5 months because work was, he wasn't working and whatnot. So he come back and then we're like, yep, we'll go out. And then we were driving out and I was like, man, the water looks really good here. So I put a mark on my GPS and I was like, we'll go out to where I've been catching the fish, which is a bit further out, maybe another 20 minutes driving in the boat. And I was like, oh, we'll fish out there. But I really like the look of that. We might come back here later. And then he was like, oh, why do you like the look of it? And I was like, oh, just the water's really blue. And that's one thing, like, generally the marlin like the really blue, clear water. So we went out. The water didn't really look that good. There wasn't much bait, not much sort of going on. And I said to him, I reckon we go back to that spot. And he's like, oh, yeah, sweet. So I put the mark in the GPS and started heading back there. Took maybe an hour and a half to troll back because you're going a bit slower. And then we literally drove straight into the area. I was like, man, the water is blue here. I reckon there's marlin here. Like 20 seconds later, boom, got him on. Yeah, and it was just like, but it was that same thing of like trusting your gut. And the more you do things, you learn what to look for. Like I talked about before in terms of defensively, I learnt to, like I'm a very good defender in terms of knowledge now because I learned to read cues and body language and setups and, the habits of teams and what moves they like to do and what a certain player, the way that he plays, like is he a distributor, is he a runner? And I can pick that up pretty quickly, like even on somebody I've never played before, just in the natural instinct of that first couple of minutes of the game. I can generally like straight away get a real good read on who I'm playing, or even if I'm watching a game, someone I've never watched play before, I can watch them and be like, oh yeah, I reckon that's the sort of player he is. And I'll, most of the time I don't voice it out loud, but I'll just internally process it and then I'll watch and I'll be like, oh yeah, I was right. Or it's not very often I'm wrong, but it's only because I've seen it over and over. Yeah. So your brain and your instinct kicks in and you're used to seeing something enough and you do it enough, then it becomes, you come like, intuitive to it. Yeah.
Yeah, the analogy I'm kind of thinking of is teaching someone to drive. Like when you drive, you don't think anything of it. And then when you teach someone to drive, you've got to like do the process. And so there's a saying out there about like when you teach somebody, two people learn, or I don't know what it is specifically, but like, so being a senior member of a team, even though you're not the coach, when it comes to running the defensive play, you're leading the defensive play. When it comes to fishing, you're out there communicating what it is that's going on in your head, and you're questioning yourself, is that right? Do I believe in that? Yeah, no, that's definitely what I'm looking for. Yeah. And then reinforces to yourself, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then your next experience is like honed even further.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was what makes it super fun.
Yeah. That's the cool part of it. Like I've said a number of times through my career, like I've loved actually getting older and being experienced because I've loved being able to share the learnings and knowledge that I've gained through my career and passing that on. Like I've had like more satisfaction, I feel, in terms of what I've been able to help people achieve than necessarily what I achieve like personally. Just at certain times and just being there and being aware of different situations, you can almost foresee slumps in form coming and you can jump in front of it before it happens, like because I've been there. I know what it's like to all of a sudden, it's easy to come in and perform well. Like adrenaline is a huge thing and it's real. Like it is the ultimate drug. It's the best thing. Like, have you ever seen an All Black debut go wrong?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't happen because there's so much adrenaline, emotion, and everything tied into it. These people are living their dream. Like, what All Black has ever pulled the jersey on and not wanted to do that since the day they put a pair of boots on, or you know, back when I started playing, you didn't wear boots. Like, when you put your first rugby jersey on, that's what you wanted to do. And then you get to that point, like, there's Lima Sopoanga made a cool comment that I've heard come out. It was on James Marshall's podcast, the What a Lad podcast, and he just said, like, he felt like Superman. When he put his All Black jersey on, the way he described it is, I felt like Superman. I felt like I could do nothing wrong. And
what a game too! What a kick!
Yeah, exactly. You know, what a debut. But the same thing again, right? Like, he's there and living his dream, and I don't know how many times he was out in that backyard practicing that kick as a kid, saying, "Oh, this is to beat, you know, South Africa in Cape Town." Or was it Johannesburg at Ellis Park? I think it was. But, you know, like that, and then you get that opportunity. There's so much like adrenaline that comes with that, and hype, and the support around you when it is your debut, because it is a new thing. It's different. So the players, when you're in a team environment, people will say, oh, that's so much pressure because that's your dream. But when you're in that environment, the players are so aware that that's your first opportunity. Like, they all know very clearly how they were in that time. So they all get around and support you to do that. Same when I played for Waikato. Like, same when I played for the Chiefs for the first time. It's very similar. Like, it's the same kind of thing, and everyone's there kind of supporting you, and your family's right behind you. Your friends are all there with you. So and then that adrenaline kicks in. You go out there, and you don't very rarely see like a poor performance.
It's funny you're saying about like the kick, and obviously you've stepped up to the tee a few times yourself. Me and my mate from Australia, he's South African, we're talking about rugby players and how private school South African rugby is like heavily involved with forwards, and like New Zealand, you know, it's a complete game, but you know, we always, you know, win the battle up front type stuff. And I was saying about Australia, I was like, oh, I think all the legends of Australia have been backs. And I said, oh, you know, what about John Eales, mate? And I said, that's the worst moment of my childhood. John Eales stepping up, knocking it over. Bledisloe Cup goes to Australia. And they were like, well, what about David Pocock and George Smith? But like, what a champion exactly that, like, when... To be that sort of personality that, hey, if the moment calls, I can go up, put the ball down, chuck it on the tee, and I'm going to kick the goal for Australia, and we're going to win the Bledisloe Cup. Like, special human, eh? And that's what it takes to be an elite sportsman. Yeah,
and part of that is like you live for those moments. Like when you're a kid, you don't practice. You don't practice, I just want to go out there and make a really good tackle. It's the tackle to win the game. Like, that's the moment. Tackle. Yeah, try-saving tackle. That's what you're searching for. It's not just scoring a try, it's scoring the winning try. Like that.
Had to defend that guy.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of like the story that you tell yourself, right? Like, I think everybody strives for, and whatever it is that they do, we're just talking about sport here, but I think in anything, like people dream, and that's such an important part of of living. Like, you have to have dreams and ambitions and things that get you out of bed in the morning.
Do you have any tools for visualization? Like, I try to write shit down.
Nah, I'm got a pretty good like imaginative mind. Like, I can visualize. I don't visualize a lot. Like, I'm more of a process person. Like, I'll think of like a goal or something I want to achieve, but then I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And then I start so I'm not like, I don't sit there and constantly
think of the end result.
Think of the end result. It's like, yep, I want to do that. Like, something might pop into my head, like, oh yeah, that would be cool to do that. Like marlin fishing, it was quite interesting listening how you got into being an optometrist. Like, you know, you saw your brother get his eyes checked at 8. Like, in terms of marlin fishing, I grew up holidaying at Whitianga and then watching marlin come in and get weighed, and then I was like, I want to catch one of those. It's taken me a long time to get to that point, but I never forgot that moment. And it was constantly there, but I didn't have the tools, resource or time to put into it to be able to achieve it. But as soon as I did it. Like, and I was like, I'm finding a way. Like, I'm gonna do this.
Love that, man.
Yeah. And then it was just like I found I had a start point. I got a bit of knowledge from the right person, and then I was like, okay, now who else can I pester? What else can I focus on? And then I just went, and then I found somebody that did it as a job. So I was like, here's my new best mate, and I just like hounded him, and then we're great friends now.
Yeah.
But definitely at that point in time when we first met, there was a selfish side of me that I wanted knowledge out of him. So
so many parallels, mate.
Yeah.
Of like, it was exactly that. Like, I want to be optometrist. What do I got to do? Oh, degree in Auckland. Okay, how do you get into that degree? You do these things. I was like, good. So that's going to be school. Sweet. I'll play sport.
Yeah.
And then it's like deer farming. It's like, okay, so how do you have a deer farm? And it's like, well, you need lots of money or some land. And it's like, okay, so I need to get lots of money. So what do I do when I get lots of money to have a deer farm? Oh, you need to know how to farm. I was like, okay, so how do you learn how to farm?
Yeah, like, everything's like, I'm
so
very...
what can I do now?
And it was interesting because I did that podcast with Brendan McCullum, and it was quite... Like, he was so open. It was cool.
Awesome. Man.
Oh, it was awesome. But just the insight to somebody that literally changed the face of cricket, like he...
What he said about the first IPL, like he brought up the stat, and I was like, it's a killer score. Like, boom. Like he said, like that was like, IPL.
He pretty much made the IPL what the IPL is, right? Like 156 in the very first innings of the tournament of this like big brand new concept. Like they would have been like, oh my God, like, thank you very much. Thank you very much for making our product the greatest cricket, sport, almost sporting product ever in terms of the support and the money that goes into that. But talking to him, and then just it was just amazing when he talked about he never wanted to be seen to be practicing too much or caring too much. He kind of wanted to just, kind of look like he was like, I'm just out here, doing it, but he always had a plan. And I was like, and it's so funny because we go through, I think of my rugby career and everything, like in teams that I've been in, you have to have a book and you have to write down the process and like all of this, like you literally had to have a book. But I was like, why do you have to have a book? So many people don't learn that way. But it was because the coach at that time wanted that. So you had to have it. So, and it's something that literally I guarantee every professional rugby player in New Zealand right now, whatever team they are in, has a book and they write down the game plan and their focuses. But then I listened to Brendan McCullum, who's arguably our best cricketer ever, and he never really trained that much, and he never wrote down a plan. He just internally processed it. And sometimes it was having a beer or in the shower, and sometimes about 5 minutes, sometimes it took 20. But he just sat down in his own head and went, okay, who am I going to take on? Who's a good matchup for me? Who is not going to be a good matchup for me? And then, okay, if he's not a good matchup for me, who in our team would be good to take him on? I'd be like, okay, well, that's Kane. All right, so I'll go talk to Kane. Kane, can you look after this guy? But because I'm going after him, and him, like, and then that's it. And then he goes out and executes. Yeah. And then it's like, well,
in the ramp shot, I was just like, like I said, there's only 4 overs, so we've got to like deal with that. And I was just like, wow.
Just had to find a way.
I was like, that's deep. You think of 20 overs, you just got to score as much runs as possible. But no, there's 4 overs where the fastest guy in the world is going to come at you with all the energy. Yeah. It's going to be 160 Ks. What the hell do you do with that? Yeah. And I can't hit him down the ground. Yeah.
So he's like, this is the only way I'm going to score, so I've got to give it a go.
Tate, was that right?
Yeah, Sean Tate. And I was just like, whoa. But yeah, like it was quite interesting, and it was really cool to hear that and that's why I asked the question. I was like, are you doing this visually or writing it down? Because in New Zealand rugby, it's drummed into us to write it down. And I definitely gained something, I think, early on in my career from writing it down, but my later part of my career, most of these meetings I was delivering everything, so I never wrote anything down. But through delivering what we were going to do, I was probably a way that I was taking it in, because I had to stand up and So I had to gain knowledge of what we wanted to do through sitting down with the coaches and coming up with a plan, but I wasn't writing it down. We would have conversation and be like, I've seen this, what have you seen in the opposition? Well, where were we weak last week? What should we focus on? You know, pretty much like Brendan, but doing it in conversation form, and then I would go and deliver to the team in terms of our attack plan. That was a big part that I drove for my last 3 years of Waikato, and you know, throughout my career I was in a number of leadership roles like that, and I would stand up, and Roger never spoke. Roger Randall was our tech coach. He never spoke in a meeting. It was always me, but he did the work behind the scenes, and then we would sit down, and he would pitch to me, but he knew that I was better to the group and better at drawing an emotion and pulling the group into believing that it was going to work. Where he was very factual and like, yeah, we're going to do this, and this, but he knew that in terms of the skill set that I had and the connection I had with the players and being there doing it with them, that it was better coming from a player. So like, he kind of empowered me to do that role. But yeah, I wasn't writing it all down, and then got, you know, some guys I would be, even when, you know, like in those last couple of years that I was playing with, like, would hide their books from me because they hadn't been writing it, and so I was like, bro, I don't write it down anyway, so don't worry. And they're like, oh, what, don't you? And I was like, nah, as long as you take it in. I was like, but don't not write it down and then fuck it up. Like, it's all good if you don't write it down, but you got to know what we're doing, so I'm going to question you, and if you don't get it right, then you need to find a way to learn. And if, like,
got to do what works for you. And
but there's not a lot of there's a lot of school teachers involved in coaching now throughout New Zealand rugby. There's a number of them, and I think that's a big part of it, is that's what they know, so that's how they teach. Classroom stuff, but it's not always the right way.
Might be why the people were on the field, because the classroom wasn't so good.
Well, I know that. But there was no way I was going to be an optometrist because school wasn't my thing, so I was like, oh, well, rugby will do.
Whereas I lapped all that stuff up. I loved mental skills, loved plays and mechanics and, you know, biomechanics, like anything with like performance and performance mindset, performance play. Like, while we're doing stuff, I'd geek out on it. But
see, I'm like that, but I can't put it in a book. So I can sit. If school was talking, I would have been ducks, you know.
Podcast at school.
So if I sat down and could talk it out with a teacher and then learn that way, then I would have been ducks. But I just couldn't learn in terms of like sit there, be talked to like a group and not be able to ask questions and dive deeper and and I think and I'm sure there's a number of people like that. And I talked to Tim Seifert when he came on his podcast, and he struggled with, he's got dyslexia, and that was a big issue that he had through school, because when they would put something up on the board and they'd be like, oh, we'll copy this down or take notes off this, like he couldn't read it, so he would just straight away be behind, or it would take him a long time to process it. And then when they would be like, all right, is everyone ready to move on? He was like the only one. He's not going to say no, so he would just leave it, and he'd be like, oh, and then all of a sudden he's sat there for the whole class and really taken nothing in because he didn't even get the first page in.
Thank God, kind of thing. Cricketer.
Yeah, exactly.
Good dude.
But a lot of like people with dyslexia are very talented athletes or in successful in business or good people skills.
Yeah, how we sort of term it in optometry is like, despite all opportunity to read, you just can't.
Yep.
And then so what's good about knowing that is like, right, okay, again, go back to sport. So we know that like copy off the board, that's not going to work. Read this material, that's not going to work. How can we do it? Like, and that means get 4 hours to do an exam, get a reader writer, get, you know, conversation skills, get your teacher to tell you what's going on, make sure you understand it. You know, make sure you're, you know, without singling you out, make sure you're all good, and then then you can become Richard Benson.
Exactly.
And ironically write a magazine.
It's funny, like I honestly think I must have elements of dyslexia myself, because I've never ever been a good speller. Like ever.
I reckon I got ADD.
Same.
Like English, and that's what I always think, because like, I was probably lucky at 12. I knew what the heck I wanted to do, and so I was just going to do that. But then I came to English, and I was like, no, I can't do this. And maybe it was just the way I was taught or whatever, but now I can sit down and like write a blog. I can, read a book or whatever. But fuck, when it came to being in English, I was just like, nah. But everything else, I was like, right, I've got a purpose. Yeah.
I was very similar at school. Like I wasn't a bad student, but I was, and like I passed all my subjects and that until I got to a point where I knew that wasn't the avenue that I was going to go down. So I got school C, got sixth form certificate, but same again, struggled with English, but was good at maths, like things that had a process to it. So back to that, back to the process thing. So anything that has a process to it and has like rhyme and reason, I'm good with. But something that is like, oh, it could be this, but it could be that, like which is what English is, right? You can write, it's fucking non-fiction or fiction. I don't even know what the difference between those two were for years. But like it's basically like there's no right or wrong. Like there's got to be a right or wrong for me to logically process it, I think. And like in terms of
English was very much how, and like, well, but what do you do?
But you could do it this way or you could do it that way, and it's like, just tell me the way to do it. Like give me some framework and then I'll put it away. And I even find that now a lot with writing emails and stuff for work. Like if I'm passionate about what I write about, I can write. I've written articles for magazines like hunting and fishing ones and things like that, and I haven't done any for rugby, but if I got asked to, I could, and I would back myself that it would be good because I'm passionate about it, and I would just put effectively conversation into words. But in terms of like once I got at school, once I knew that, I think it was off my sixth form cert marks, I was going to go and do the sports science course at the Wintec here, the Wintec here in Hamilton, and I passed sixth form cert enough that I was going to get accepted to that. But I went back for seventh form because I wanted to play rugby and I wanted to make New Zealand schools, and thank God I did, because that's where all my opportunity came in terms of rugby. But school just went out the back door because I was like, well, I've got what I need to do what I'm doing next year, so I'm just literally here to play rugby. But if I had my future mapped out and I needed to do something post that year, or I needed to do something in that year, I would have put my mind to it to do it. But because I knew I had done enough to get accepted, and I'd already been told that you'll get accepted off what you've done, I was like, sweet, I can say goodbye to that,
put my attention elsewhere.
I can say goodbye to that part of my life because I don't enjoy it that much, and I'm going to focus on my goal kicking.
Good. Sweet, bro, it's getting pretty late. This has been freaking awesome, even with the microphone falling off. Thankfully I can edit that part out and people won't have a big slap on their ears. Bang. But bro, you've listened to a few episodes. I try to get people to leave us with what keeps them in flow, like something that shows up when things are going well, or allows you to keep doing the things that you want to do and go through that process. No, it's been I don't know, like I suppose for like a big part of my life and the way that I've kind of been is like just control, like I mentioned earlier, control what you can control, and then don't worry too much about things that you can't. But if you want to achieve something, then you'll find a way to get there through like a process, and you'll work it out and lean off other people and ask, be willing to ask questions and listen. Like I think listening is a huge tool that a lot of people don't utilize enough. There's so much knowledge out there, and in all forms now. There's podcasts, there's video, there's just people that are really open and have achieved things that you can just bowl up to and have a conversation, or you can reach out to on social media, and there's lots of different avenues now to pull knowledge. But you got to be willing to listen to the knowledge and to try and process that and how it kind of works for you. But I think that's like control what you can control, and then just be open to advice. Don't be scared to fail. There's a lot of things I've kind of mentioned there, but just that
control what you can control is probably the big one.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I started this podcast, I was getting ready for a semi-final, and that was one of the things I did a 5-minute podcast on, Control the Controllables. Yeah, bro.
Nice.
I think I was reading DG's book, actually.
Yeah.
Sweet, bro. So, Waterboy, they can find Instagram, website.
Yep.
Then you got Real Tales with Sweens.
Yep, it's my so I've got realtaleswithsweens.com's the webpage, and then just Real Tales with Sweens on Instagram as well. So it's heaps of cool content on there, and been pretty fortunate that I've got to sit down with some pretty cool guests, and I suppose that whole professional rugby thing's come in handy. Opens awesome. A few doors, so it's been good to get, I suppose, in behind and find a little bit more depth to the people that have had successful careers, and get them to open up and share that. Like we talked a bit about Brendan and what he was able to do, and it's pretty cool to hear that you don't have to write it all down. You can just visualize it and internally process it, and if that's the way you want to action it, then that works for you, then it works for you. Yeah,
and can people see footage of game fishing yet, or?
There's a little bit, like I've got a few little videos and stuff I've done on YouTube, so my YouTube channel's the same, Real Tales with Sweens. A good friend of mine actually just edited up an edit of last summer, like a bit of highlights kind of package with some good music and stuff to it, so I might actually put that on my webpage as well while I think about it. But that's on YouTube there as well. All the podcasts are on YouTube too, but I haven't set up the laptop or the high quality filming that we've got going on here. So they're just audio on there, but they're all there so that people can listen to it in whatever kind of form that they like to listen to their podcast. It was pretty enjoyable. Hope I didn't ramble too much.
Bloody awesome, man. Thank you.
Sweet.
Let's get out of these headphones.
Yeah.